Hello, my name is Brian Stewart. I am the chairman of Little Leaven Children's Homes. Welcome to part 3 of our child development training program. Excuse me. This training program is on. It's called Little Leaven 202, and it is on cognitive growth and development. So we're gonna just jump into it. It's gonna be about an hour long. Hopefully you'll learn something or review some stuff that you already knew. So I'm gonna share screen right now. All right, so let's go to cognitive growth and development. Here we go. Oops, let's see. Okay, yeah, cognitive growth and development, Little Leaven Children's Homes. All right, so what we're gonna here's what we're gonna go through today. We're gonna talk about the purpose, why we're doing cognitive growth and development, and we're gonna go into the 6 methods of decisions. Okay, 6 methods in which decisions are made. That'll take a little while. Then after that, we'll talk about how intelligence is measured. Okay, because we can't really tell if we're doing a good job unless we have some kind of measure, some kind of metric. And so we're going to go over how intelligence is actually measured, because a lot of people, they'll say, hey, that guy is smart over there, but well, why do you say he is smart, right? So we're gonna explain why people say people are smart or intelligent when they say that. Okay, and so that way we can know and understand that portion of it and see what our goals are. And obviously the 6 methods of decisions, that's because you got to know how decisions are made, the different ways decisions are made, so that way you can know how to make better decisions. Okay, and train children up, because remember what the goal is training these children up to make good decisions and to be intelligent. Talk about the working memory. Okay, real quick, because the working memory kind of puts everything together, all the decisions making methods and good decisions, intelligent decision makings. Okay. Then we'll go over the cognitive development recommendations. Actually, in between the working memory and the cognitive development recommendations, we're going to go over the stages of development. I should have put that in there. Let me see if I can. Let me. Oops, hold on. Edit that real fast. Just go ahead and edit that in there, because that's the next part. Is stages of development, stages of cognitive development. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about. So what's the purpose? Okay, it's all about, so here I said it's all about decisions, because that's why we develop people cognitively. Okay, we want people to be mature cognitively, because we want them to make good decisions. It's very simple. That's why it's all about decisions, and that's why we talk about the different ways that you make decisions and how to be effective in your decisions, because that's what good cognitive development results in. It results in people that make good decisions. In essence, the reason we want people to be cognitively fully mature is so that people would make smart decisions, intelligent decisions. So there are 6 methods of 6 ways to make decisions. Okay, there's categorizing, quantifying, experimenting, visualizing, validating, and socializing. Okay, sometimes when we make decisions, we're only going to use one of these methods, but usually, especially an intelligent person, someone who's really mature, he's not going to just use one of these methods. For the most part, the methods, using one method of making decisions, that's kind of elementary, right? An intelligent person, we want them to use all the different, we're going to want them to combine as many of the decision-making methods as possible when they make a decision. All right. Sometimes you don't need to. Sometimes you only need to use one. You know, like with, especially with quantifying. We'll get to quantifying in a little bit, but with quantifying, hey, if you need to count your money, you don't need to visualize in order to count your money, or experiment to count your money. You just need to quantify. That's all you got to do. So sometimes, you know, decisions or things you do, it only takes one method, right? Okay, so we're moving on. So categorizing. What is categorizing? So categorizing is one of the more basic decision making methods. All right. When you categorize something, what you're basically doing is you're taking what has been already cataloged in your mind. So, you know, that's what I said, cataloging. So the cataloging is different from categorizing, right? So you've got a catalog of things that you've seen before: flowers, cups, balls, wheels. You've seen all these things before. And then, so when you see something new, like you may have seen a basketball before, but you've never seen a soccer ball before. So when you see the soccer ball, in the past, you've seen basketballs, and you've seen that basketballs are good for bouncing. They're good for shooting. They're fun to play with. When you drop it, it bounces, right? So when you see the soccer ball for the first time, you put it into a ball category. You know, you got a catalog. You go to your catalog in the back of your mind, and you put it into a category. Say, oh, this soccer ball is probably similar to the basketball, and it probably is good for kicking too. Or maybe it's not good for kicking. Maybe it's good for shooting, or whatever. But you put it into a category of balls, and you say, hey, this is just like the other one. It's just like a different color. Or maybe, so that's categorizing and comparing things. Categorizing you do it with balls. You can do it with animals. Okay. You see a cat, and you say, hey, it's got a tail, it's got 4 legs, it's walking on 4 legs, it's moving, it's making sounds. I think that that's an animal, as opposed to, I think that that's a car, right? And you know that because you've seen other things like that ended up being animals, ended up being alive, as opposed to a car, which is an inanimate object, right? Then you have And then you have different types of cats. Maybe you have a tiger and a lion, like they're 2 different, but they're both cats, and so you categorize them as cats. You have different types of dogs: beagles and huskies and Labradors, and they're all dogs, but you categorize them and you compare them. That's categorizing. It's very simple. It's just saying, hey, that's a ball, it probably bounces. That's a dog, it probably barks. Okay. Poops on the lawn. Okay. Quantifying experimenting. They're 2 different things. I just put them on the same slide just to kind of help it go by faster. But they're 2 different things. Although these are both more mathematical, and they're both more objective, I should say, as opposed to subjective. You know, colors and shapes are very subjective, right? This is more objective, quantifying, experimenting. So quantifying is very simple. You know, you're measuring it. You could be measuring it by weight. You could be measuring it by quantity, numbers, by size, by how fast it goes or how slow it goes. That's quantifying something, and that's one of the decision making processes. You know, say, okay, I want something fast, so I'm going to get, you know, the sports car. Or I want something that can pull a heavy load, so I'm going to get the truck. Quantifying, boom. Of course, you know, you're going to look at, you can't really quantify without numbers, so you're going to look at the statistics and whatnot. But you know, you're going to see when you look at the specs on a vehicle, you know, one's faster, one's slower, one's heavier, one's lighter. That's quantifying. Experimenting. Now, experimenting, remember I was saying before that some of these decision makings, they can be independent, and meanwhile other decision makings usually don't don't run independently. Experimenting is one of those that you can't really run that one independently. In order to experiment, you gotta have either some categorization or some quantification, right, to experiment. And what experimenting is doing, it's when you say, okay, if I hit it, will it break? If I drop it, will it fall? You know, if I you know, put in, so that's what experimenting is. It has to do with hypothesis, and what's going to happen when I do it. Right now, my son is 2 years old, and he loves to experiment on what happens when it gets wet, right? Okay, so that's a decision making ability. So what we're saying is that you think, you know, you think about what you think it's going to happen, and usually use categorizing to do that, because you've seen something happen similar before, and then you apply the stimuli and you see what happens. And it's experimenting. Visualizing. Visualizing is much more complex than the other ones, and you really need to have some experimenting background or some categorizing background. You know, you have to use those other decision-making skills to visualize. Okay. And what you're doing when you visualize is it's a higher level. That's when you're imagining what is going to happen when you do something in your mind, and you actually put an image in your head. Because when you hit the visualize, you may not be there. You may be thinking about, okay, what am I going to do when I'm at a basketball game or at a football game? But you're not actually at the football game or the basketball game. When you're experimenting and making decisions off of experimentation, you're there. When you're visualizing, you're not there. You're in your head. It's different. It's different to visualize than to experiment. Experiments, hands-on, is in your head. So, here's an example of visualization. So, I was talking to a friend, and so there's this book. I was talking to a friend about everyone, you know, Little Leaven is not a Christian organization, but I am a Christian, and so I talk about the Bible quite a bit. But my friend and I were talking about the Bible, and we were talking about how the book of Philemon, which is a letter. There's a letter in the Bible called Philemon, where Paul writes a letter where Paul receives someone who is a runaway slave, and he befriends the runaway slave. He really likes the runaway slave, and he sends, but he knows that the guy is supposed to be a slave and he's supposed to be with his master. So he writes a letter to the master, who he knows, he personally knows, and he says, "Hey, I'm sending your slave back. I know he ran away and whatnot, and please take him back, and please be good to him when he comes back." All right. And I was arguing with my friend, and I was saying that, hey, you know, when Paul wrote this letter, he was basically, he had an opportunity to say slavery is wrong, but he didn't take that opportunity. And so that says something about the Bible and how it was arranged, and how not all scripture, not all parts of the Bible, because there's a lot of debate in the Bible. There's a lot of debate that that when someone reads the Bible, that it's speaking to them and it's speaking universal truths. But in this case, Paul has the opportunity to speak against slavery, but doesn't take it, which to me is evidence that that the Bible doesn't always speak universal truth. But a lot of the Bible is just stories about something that happened, and in this case, this is just a letter that was sent from Paul to another guy. And so we were getting into this, and we're using this as an example. And then I was, before I talked to him, I was visualizing on what his responses were going to be. And what I said to myself is, I said, okay, I'm going to bring up this story of how Paul wrote this letter, and how Paul did not say that slavery was wrong, and did not say, hey, you should free your slave, which says something about the Bible, says something about how the Bible was created, and the motivations and how the Bible was put together. And and I knew, I said to myself, okay, so when I tell him, I'm going to tell him a story, because I worked in China for a while, and I had a similar situation to what Paul had dealt with when I met a North Korean man who was on the run from the North Korean regime, because we know it's all bad in North Korea, right? And so what happened was, when I was in China, Korean guy who was on the run, and according to what, and this is what I was going to tell my friend, according to what the Bible says, what Paul did, Paul sent the slave back to his owner with a letter saying, please be nice to the guy, is essentially what Paul did. And so, and I told Eric, my friend, I said, hey, what in this situation, if I were to do what Paul did, then that means that you're saying that when I met this North Korean guy, that I should have sent him back to North Korea with a letter to the North Korean president, Kim Jong-il, at the time. It's Kim Jong-un now, but at the time it was Kim Jong-il. And saying to Kim Jong-il, hey, I'm sending this guy back. He ran away. Please be nice to him. And we all know that Kim Jong-il, when that guy gets back, he's going to kill that guy, right? And so was that the right thing to do? That's not what I did. Of course, I helped that guy to get out of his situation, and he should, I think, pretty sure he's in South Korea now. But that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, that if I were to do what Paul did, then that's what I would have done. But I don't think that Paul was right in doing. I'm not saying that Paul wasn't right in doing that, but I'm saying that Paul was not trying to give a universal truth about what you should do when he did that. That was just a situation that Paul was in and what Paul did. That's all it was. It wasn't saying that we should always send slaves back to their masters, which has implications for the Bible. If you say that there's implications, because now you're saying that this letter to the 2 Corinthians was to the Corinthians. The letter to the Ephesians was to the Ephesians. That's the implications of saying that, right? And not that it was to the modern day church. And so that means that maybe rules like that maybe we thought applied to them, or maybe do not apply to us, right? So I was trying to explain that. And so in that, I wanted to visualize, okay, so when I give him this scenario of me with this North Korean man, what is it that this guy who I'm talking with is going to say differently in order to say that, oh no, it's a different situation. And I thought to myself, he's probably going to say it was different because Paul was giving this guy to a believer. Paul was sending this guy back to a believer, so it's different. That's probably what he's going to say. And so then I entered the conversation with him later, because I visualized this beforehand. And sure enough, I gave this scenario about me with the North Korean guy. And I said, well, according to Paul, I should have sent him back to Kim Jong-il. And then he said, well, that's different, just like I thought he was going to say, because he was a believer. And I said, so, and I had my pre-arranged response, like a good lawyer has. And I said, okay, well, so you're saying that it's okay to be a slave master if you're a Christian? And of course, he didn't know what to say afterwards, because I knew that he was going to say that. And I knew that what he was saying was wrong. And that's visualization. It's thinking about what someone is going to do and mapping it out in your head, putting a scene in your head and making it happen in your head, and then playing it out on the ground. Best for me. So in all these things, we want to, let me go back a slide, categorizing. And all these things, we want to be teaching the children how to get better at categorizing, how to get better at quantifying, experimenting, okay? How do you get better at categorizing? You expose the children to a lot of different things. You take them to the zoo. You take them to basketball games. You take them to the park. You take them to the aquarium. And then he can see a lot of different things, and it helps him to be better at categorizing. Okay, that's what we want to do as developers, as people raising up children. as child development professionals. Okay. Quantifying. How do you do that? You know, that's easy. Teach them how to count, right? Teach them how to add, teach them multiply. We do that very well. Everyone does that. Experimenting. You got to let the child play with the water. You got to let them get dirty. You got to let them interact with the environment. Let them touch things. Let them, obviously you don't want them to touch the power screwdrivers or power tools, but you got to let them interact with stuff. Let them participate in mixing the pancake mix, or putting baking the cookies. Let them experiment. Let them participate. Let them make the decision on how you're going to do it. Let them propose to them. Well, how are we gonna cook this? What setting should we put on the oven? Things like that is allows them to get better at experimentation. Okay, and then back to visualization, it's the same thing. So how would you do that? Okay, well, how would you do that? How would you visualize? How do you teach them to visualize? There's a lot of different methods. You just have to use your imagination. Using your imagination, imaginary friends. That's letting kids play imaginative games, pretending to be a superhero. That helps them to visualize. Okay, it's a fun ways to visualize. My suggestion for visualization, in a big part, is chess. I think chess is one of the best ways to teach kids to visualize, because in chess, in order to be successful, you have to think about what people are going to do. It teaches you to be a strategist, and it teaches you that whenever you make a move, before you say something, before you do something, you think about how are they going to respond. And with the story I told you with my friend, where I knew that he was going to respond by saying, "Oh, it's okay," because he's a believer. I knew he was going to say that because I visualized it beforehand, and I had a pre-ready response, and I was already ready. I was going to say, "So you're saying that it's okay to be a slave master if you're a Christian?" Because it's not okay. And I'm hoping that one day he realizes that there's a really good reason why there's a reason why there's a book called Fileman in the Bible that was put in the Bible. That's a whole nother story, but I'm just trying to give an example of visualization, of imagining how someone is going to respond and then being ready for that response, right? That's visualizing, being a strategist. We want our kids to do this. We want our kids to visualize. How do people going to respond? Chess is a great way. Every single time you make a move on the chessboard, you have to think about how that person's going to respond. And then when you get really good, you're thinking 3 steps ahead. You're thinking, I'm going to do this, 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 and this. And he's going to do this, 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 and this. Validating and socializing, right? Okay, so these are similar because they have to do with interacting with people. But what validating is when you hear a story and you decide whether or not it's true. Okay, someone who is intelligent, someone who is mature and cognitively can hear a story and is going to correctly say, hey, this is the truth or this is not the truth. No, I don't believe that. Okay, children, they believe everything you tell them, right? But adults don't do that because they've seen things and they've experienced things. Now, how do you, and someone who is not good at validating, we would call that person gullible or naive, right? How do you keep your child from becoming a naive or gullible adult? The way you do that is you give them stories, you tell them stories, and then you say, okay, so what do you think? Do you think that was true or not? All right, you be honest with them. No, it's not true. No, it's not true. You tell them some false stories, and then tell them the truth. But you don't want to, like, I'm against Santa Claus, right? I'm not really a big fan of Santa Claus because I feel like you're telling a kid something that's not true for so long, you know. And I'm into just telling kids the truth, right? Tell the kids the truth, help them to know what's the difference between right and wrong, help them to very quickly develop that insight that, hey, people don't always tell the truth, and you gotta kind of sift through the facts. But one of the best ways I think to teach people how to validate is by news, reading the news to them, telling them what's going on in the world, making sure your news is diverse, because we all know that the news, every news station has their own perspective because of their own culture that they come from. Multiple news outlets, international news. I know it sounds really boring, but it's good for the kids to know what's going on in the world. Let them listen to the news. Okay. A cognitively mature person is skeptical and appropriate. All right. Socializing. All right. So what we're doing with Little Leaven is called whole person development, right? That we develop the whole person, and we have 5 pillars of development. We have the spiritual, the cognitive, the social, the emotional, and the physical. Okay. Now, this doesn't mean that we're 5 different people, because we have these 5 different parts of our whole person. We're one person. We're one whole person, but we're made up into 5 different parts. But because this all combines into one person, there has to be some overlap. Okay, and so as we go through this, we're going to find that there's overlap in the different areas. And one of the areas that overlaps with cognitive development is social development. Okay, because you can only go so far in your social development without being mature cognitively mature. Okay, so when we're talking about socializing, for the most part, we're talking about the brain's ability, because to understand and read social cues. Okay, that when someone leans in towards you, that means they're interested. When someone moves away, they're disinterested. When someone puts their hands on their hips, that means that maybe they're upset, or they're skeptical. When someone folds their arms, maybe that means that they're defensive. Okay, there's a lot of social cues involved in cognitive development. Okay, that you have to develop cognitively. It's more than just the social aspect. It's more than just social development. It's also cognitive development as a part of being social and being social successfully. And a big part, like a good example of that, is someone who is autistic. Okay, people with autism, oftentimes they miss social cues because of their social anxiety. Okay, and that's an example of how the cognitively you just don't develop those. Your inability to mature cognitively can affect your ability to succeed socially. Now, Little Leaven, we don't teach on helping children with mental disabilities that debilitate them from being socially successful. We don't do that. Maybe someday we will. It's 2016 as I'm doing this video. Maybe when you're watching it, it's 2026, and now we have a great program, and I hope so. That would be awesome. But as you're listening, as this is getting done in 2016, we don't deal with that. We're not ready to deal with that. But one thing we have to do in the cognitive realm is we need to tell the kids about social cues and teach them the social cues. And a lot of this is dependent on the culture. Okay, from most of the stuff that we're teaching on is not culture. It's not heavily cultural dependent. But social cues are very heavily cultural dependent. It really depends on what culture you are. The responsibility of the surrogates, or the to make sure that these kids are learning the social cues. And this is an area actually that that we fail a lot in society. Like society has a, in American society anyways, and I think in a lot of societies, we don't take the time out to explain to people what this means when you do this, what this means when you say things like this, when you raise your voice, what does that mean? When you put your hands up, what does that mean? When you refuse food, what does that mean socially? How does that affect? We don't teach that. We don't teach about we just don't do a good job at teaching those social cues that are critical, and they're really critical to success, to someone being successful in society. And we really need to take the time out to identify social cues and teach the children how to recognize social cues, and how to use social cues to express themselves. And I think I mentioned it before, an area where we need to be more flexible in is these emoticons. So we'll talk about that more with social development. But anyway, so that's part of cognitive development is that social aspect. And all of the different parts overlap. Okay. And one of the things we do with Little Leaven, I wanted to hit on this too, because we're talking about how our different areas of whole person development interact and overlap. Okay. It goes further than that. These children are interacting with other children, which affects their school. And when these kids become adults, they're going to affect their community, and the community is going to affect the city, and the city is going to affect the province, and so on and so forth, and the world. And that's the goal: is to have children that are, or have people have a world that is developed and is mature. So that way, it's better for everybody. Yeah. Okay. So how do we measure intelligence? We finally finished the different decision makings. We're measuring intelligence now. So there are 4 ways in which we measure intelligence: efficiency, capability, focus, and flexibility. So efficiency, what that is that is how quickly you're able to make a decision. When you see, and here's an example, when you see somebody and they're quick to answer, to get the answer right, you're like, oh man, he's smart, he's intelligent. Yeah, that's right. And we're all we're doing is putting that into words. Hey, efficiency, we're calling that efficiency. He's that person can quickly see something, quickly access the catalog in the back of his brain and his long-term memory, bring it to his working memory, and then act on it very quickly. That's efficiency. And when someone is efficient, we consider them to be smart and intelligent. Okay. The way someone gets more efficient is by repetition. Okay. Practice. Someone who can dribble behind his back, a basketball, can dribble the basketball behind his back. He practices it again and again, and he gets really good at it, and he becomes efficient. His brain quickly maps that, and that network is stronger to going there. It's like you've got a road, and the first time it's like you're walking in the snow. Okay. The first time you walk in the snow to a place, and it's like your brain is walking. It's like your brain is a snowed up area. Okay. And one side of the snowed up area is your working memory. The other side is your long-term memory. And the first time you walk, you make a path in that snow, and then you walk back. So you walk from your working memory to your long-term memory, then walk back to your working memory. Now you just made some footprints in that snow. The next time you walk again, now there's more footprints, and eventually that snow area gets flat and it becomes a path. And the more you go, it becomes a road, and then it becomes a high-speed highway, interstate. because it gets bigger because so many people are using it. And then your brain is faster. It makes you more efficient. That's the way that works. Okay. Capability. Capability is the brain's ability to handle multiple variables, multiple situations at one time. Okay, so I like basketball, so we'll go back to the basketball metaphor. So the guy dribbling behind his back, right? That was, he practiced it and he's getting really efficient at it. Okay, but now try dribbling behind your back, passing behind your back, shooting a 3-pointer, and blocking a basket, all in 5, all within 1 minute, like Reggie Miller. Okay, so that's capability. That's the ability to do multiple things at one time. All right, it's putting together different skills to make it all come together. Someone who's really smart can in their head, they can take multiple questions and then answer, and then come to the answer, and they do it all the math in their head, because they can hold one variable. Like you may have 3 variables in a calculation, and he can hold variable A, hold variable X, and hold variable Y, all in different places and moving around in his brain until he gets the answer. That's someone who's very mentally capable. So people who can handle more than one thing like that, we say, oh man, he did that math all in his head. He's very smart. Right? And everything. So it was fast, speed, efficiency, and capability. He can do it all in his head, all those things. Wow, he's smart. Okay. And then how do we get better at capable? More capability. We challenge our children. Hey, do the math in your head. We challenge our children. Hey, now that you can do this and this. All right. Now that you can block, now block and punch at the same time. Now block, punch, and kick at the same time. All right. Okay. Focus. Focus is the ability to have a situation and to figure out what information is important and what information is not important, and then make a decision. It's being able to focus on what's important, looking at all the factors, figuring out what's irrelevant, what's distracting, and then focusing on what you need to do in order to solve the problem. I'll give you an example. Okay, a guy back when I was a kid, they used to just teach you, hey, in math class, they would teach you, hey, learn 2 + 2 = 4. But now, what they try to do is they try to do more word problems in school. So that way the children learn focus. They learn to block out the things that are irrelevant in the situation. Okay. So you'll get a problem like, okay, if the guy walks 2 miles to the store, he buys apples and oranges. Then the guy walks 4 miles and buys a cat and a camel. Then the guy walks 6 miles and then he goes home. And then the question is how many miles did he walk? So then you have to put aside, all the different places he went, and you have to go back and say, well, wait a minute, what is the question? We have all this information about where he went and what she did, but what's the real question? And the real question was, how far did they go? So then you take the 2 miles and the 4 miles and the 6 miles and you add them up and you get 12. That's focus. Right. All right. It also shows a capability. Now what if I asked you, so what did he buy? How powerful is your ability? How good are you? How capable is your brain? How well were you able to juggle those multiple scenarios? Do you remember that he picked up an orange and an apple? Do you remember that he picked up a camel and a cat? Remember that? Okay, that's capability. That's your mind's capability to juggle information. And then focus was your ability to actually answer the question and to block out the other information. And efficiency is how fast you did it. How long did it take you? Did you have to think about it a long time, or did you just bang it out? Okay. Flexibility, that's your mind's ability to take on something new. Okay, so how do we teach kids to focus? Um, Easy. I mean, you just give them problems like we did there. Okay, and then also part of focusing is not just like solving a math problem, but it's also when things are distracting around you. Can you focus on what you need to get done? Can you do your studies in a loud room? Okay, someone who can focus. That's an intelligent person. It's someone who can focus when you're in a loud room, there's music playing, but you're still able to do your work. You know, some people might think, oh man, you don't want to put your kid into a loud room when he's got homework to do. Maybe you do want to do that. Maybe you need to teach him to focus. Maybe that's a technique. And then flexibility, new things. How many new things? Okay, so a smart person can see something completely different. He'll be able to categorize. He'll be able to quantify, experiment, and solve the problem. Then that person is intelligent. He's flexible. All right, and the way you do that is you constantly give your children new things. You don't, it's one of the biggest themes in cognitive development. One of the biggest things in cognitive development is exposing your child to new things, as many new things as possible, and allowing them to get involved. Let's so the working. Let's go. Let's continue. The working memory. So we talk. Uh, so the information goes from your long-term memory to your working memory, and then it's going to use 6 different means of solving problems. And so we're wrapping this up basically. So we have on our left, we have the methods of problem solving. Those are the 6 ways in which you solve problems. And if you do those quickly, if you do those efficiently, if you can handle multiple problems at once, if you can segregate, if you can discriminate from the important information and the unimportant information, and if you're flexible to new problems, then you are intelligent. Okay, and then to the left, that's to the right, and then to the left, that's the way in which you solve problems. And that is, and when someone can do all those things, when he's intelligent, he's efficient, he's capable, when he can quantify and he can visualize, when she can socialize, then she is intelligent and she is successful and she is cognitively mature. Okay, we put all those things together, and that's how you problem solve, and that's how you problem solve well. And that's remember we said in the beginning, it's all about solving problems. It's all about making decisions. So here's your stages of development. Okay, so we've seen a similar chart with the spiritual development chart. All right, to the left is your titles and the number stage. To the right is your explanations. Okay, so if you just kind of just going down, you can look at this on your own. I don't, you should have received this in a paper copy of the whole child development program, so you can go through this chart on your own. It's not really complicated. I'm just going to kind of break it down for you. The child basically starts off with the ability to just sense their environment. Then that's infant stages, and then as they get older, then they start to see that they can interact with their environment, that they can affect their environment. That's an important part of cognitive growth. Then they start to see patterns in that. Like if they do something, then this will happen. Okay, a cause and effect. Then they start to attribute. Then they start to look at attributes, and they start categorizing and saying, "Hey, this thing is rubber, so it's going to bounce." Things like that. They start to see. Then they start to see how they can use one object against another object. Like maybe this object is sharp, so it cuts. Okay. Or maybe this object is sticky, so it sticks. They start to see that these type of things can occur, and sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. My son, a good example is magnets. My son had these magnet cars one time, and then ever since then, he'd always try to make the cars stick. He'd get really frustrated that the cars, because he didn't realize that these other cars weren't magnets. So he knew that there was he knew. So my son he's 2, or he was at the time he was about a year and a half, and he still doesn't understand it. He's still trying to figure it out. Like he's 2 now, and he sees that, hey, this thing is a sticker and it sticks, but how come it doesn't stick anymore? Or how come this one doesn't stick and this one is? He still doesn't quite get it. Why the magnet sticks to this, but it does, like, cause it sticks to metal. Like, he understands the magnets stick, but how come he doesn't understand? He's not seeing that, hey, it sticks to metal. He's seeing that it sticks to the table and it doesn't stick to the door, but he doesn't understand that the table is metal and the door is wood. And when he's 4 years old, he's 2 right now. He probably will get it then, right? That's when he's supposed to be experiencing that. Okay, looking at stage. So we just did stages 1 through 4. Okay, just did stages 1 through 4, and then now we're at stage 5. Stage 5 is using object against an object. I think we talked. Okay, we kind of did stage 4 and 5. Okay, then when you start getting into representational systems, and this is kind of a big leap, when you start to see that heavy objects have different effects on things like springs than lighter objects. And then you start to get into stage 7. You start to get an ability to kind of like, okay, well, I can make it lighter, I can make it heavier, and then it's going to have a different effect. And that's when you're kind of a teenager and you start to kind of do your science experiments and things like that. And then you get even more abstract as you become a later teen and into your adulthood. And then you start to take into consideration people who have the ability to make decisions. When you start to take into consideration emotions, and you start to take into consideration life goals, and you can see how those can work together, and how people can come together to be a team or be a married couple. And that's where we want to get people eventually. Like with Little Leaven, for the most part, we believe that people should, for Little Leaven, for the most part, we take kids who are not in nuclear families where there's a mom and a dad, and there is, there's structure, and the mom and dad work together to take care of the family. These kids, and little Leaven kids, they're not used to that, and so we want to teach them that is where they want to be when they're adults, even though they didn't have that. And so that's the goal in a lot of our areas of development is understanding how people we talk about whole person development. So like all the different stages come together, so with the goal that you would understand that, hey, we are in a society. We should work together in our society. We should get married. We should take care of our kids, things like that, because they don't have those things. They're not taught. They're not going to be taught those things unless we teach it to them. Otherwise, they'll be like their parents, and then and not saying that their parents are bad people, but they were incapable, or for some reason, of actually raising their own kids. Okay. Recommendations. We want to ensure that the kids are always challenged in their classes. If they're not challenged, we got to assign extra work, because that's how the brain develops. It needs to be challenged, right? Okay, that's what makes the brain better, and that's what puts these kids ahead. We want to expose the children to as many new things. I talked about that. Field trips, cultural events, these type of things you want to expose them to, so that way they can see more. They can see more possibilities, and they'll be more flexible, right? Because they're exposed to more things. They'll be better at validating because they've seen more. Okay, back to those different decision-making techniques, and those different and the efficiency of the brain, and the flexibility of the brain. If you as you expose kids to more different things, they'll get more flexible, and they'll be more efficient, and more able to validate, right? So encourage initiative and imaginative problem solving. That helps with the visualization. That's a really big one, and it helps with the experimentation, being able, they're able to put their hands on it. Okay. Helps them to learn that. Visualizing is so important, in the grand scheme of making strategic plans and things like that, so you can be successful in life. Educate. We mentioned this before. Educating children on nonverbal cues. You gotta do it. You gotta specifically do it. You got to tell them, hey, this is a nonverbal cue. I want to mention an important nonverbal cue is clothing. Okay, if a man or a woman wears certain clothing, there's a verbal cue, a nonverbal cue, a nonverbal cue that goes with that clothing. And in order to protect our children, we have to teach them about nonverbal cues and what type of message you're sending based on what kind of clothing you are wearing. I'm not saying that a victim is a victim, but you can help protect yourself from and keep yourself from becoming a victim by wearing the right clothing. Okay. Ensure children are reading, watching local news. That's with the validating mostly. Okay. You don't want to raise up fools who believe everything that people say. You gotta expose them to the world around them, so that way they can know when they're being told the truth and when they're being told a lie. Encourage children to read biographies and autobiographies. That's really good for validation too, so they can see how things happened, right? And it gives them it's so good. Biographies and autobiographies, so good. All right, so we're not doing any questions. Before, when I first designed this was going to be an online class, but we're just doing recordings, so there's no questions. Well, if you have questions, then send me an email, Brian, BRIAN @littleLeaven.com. Hook me up, let me know. Concerns, questions, give me a call, whatever you want to do. So that's the end of that. Stop sharing my screen. I think we're back on the camera. And thank you for watching Little Leaven 202. I hope you learned something, and I hope that you're, working towards making kids' lives better, making our society better and our community better, and just sharing the love, because that's what we do. That's one of our values there. So thank you very much for caring about the kids and for listening to this. It really is. It's an important thing. It's our future.